I said a moment ago that there are two things that are an anchor to my faith in times of trial and suffering. One of them is the footprint of biblical prophecy. But the second thing is the uniqueness, and in fact, let's just come out and say it, the supremacy of Jesus Christ. Ask yourself as you look at Him, who is like Him? I shared some of the ideas I want to share with you now over the next couple minutes with the church back around Christmas. I shared this with our youth group recently. So kids, some of you young people may remember this. You say, what's so special about Jesus? Well, write these things down. Then you decide. First of all, the words of Jesus. Many Bibles conveniently put Jesus' words all in red. They're there for you to look at. And as you read them, I want you to ask yourself, who in the history of humanity has spoken like this? Jesus blows the field away. And not only was it the content of His communication, the words that He said, but it was the authority with which He spoke. Back then, people were in awe of the authority He had, an authority that people just didn't use back then or today. Consider this. Consider, secondly, the weight of Jesus. And I'm not referring to how much He weighed. Well, Jesus, you could stand to go for a jog or something. Not that. I'm talking about His self-assurance. Some might call it arrogance, even lunacy. Jesus had no doubt about who He was and what He came to do. And while Jesus never came right out and said the words, I am God, He gave everyone who watched Him every reason to believe it. He accepted worship, like we said. He forgave people their sins. He had the audacity to just say, I forgive you. He called Himself the Lord of the Sabbath, claiming to have authority over one of the Jews' most holiest days. He boasted that heaven and earth would pass away, but His words would never pass away. Who speaks like this? I don't even think Donald Trump has spoken words like that. He hasn't, has he? I think he's come close, but even what he says here in the Palm Sunday story, I tell you, if these people were silent, the rocks would cry out in praise of me. Who talks that way? I hear people say all the time, I've heard family members that I love say, Jesus we like. I love Jesus. He's a good man. He's a fine teacher. I respect Him. But you know what? Jesus does not give you that option of thinking that way about Him. When you read the claims of Christ, you can only conclude, and this is not original to me, you could only conclude one of two things, that He is either a lunatic, a nutcase of all nutcases, that when it came to having a Messiah complex, he broke the mold. Or you can conclude that He is who He said He was, the King of Kings, God in human flesh. You can either run from Him as a madman or fall down and worship Him. But then ask yourself, could a man such as this be crazy? Not when you consider the next couple of qualities Jesus exhibited. Think of this, His wisdom, the wisdom of Jesus. If God were to come to earth, you wouldn't be able to trick Him. You wouldn't be able to fool Him or hoodwink Him, pull the wool over His eyes. People tried to do that with Jesus all the time. Hey, Jesus, should we pay taxes to Caesar? Hey, Jesus, we caught this woman committing adultery. The law says we should stone her. What should we do? Where's the dude? No, there was no time where they could trip Jesus up. It was as though He could look right inside their hearts and read their minds. People who are mentally unstable can be brilliant. But there's a difference between brilliance and wisdom. You could not fool this man. You could not expose him as a fraud. Consider then the way of Jesus. Think of the way He treated people. Think of the way He loved children, the respect with which He regarded women in that culture when women were barely regarded better than cattle. Think of the tenderness with which Jesus treated the poor, the touching of the leper, no social distancing there. His weeping with the grieving, His determination to find a lost soul, His anger at unjust leaders who ripped off those in His charge. Is it any wonder that people flock to this man? Above all, when I think of the way of Jesus, I also think of His sinlessness. I challenge you, my friend, if you're listening to me, I dare you to find a mistake in Him. I dare you to find one flaw, one blemish, one scandal, one sin, one act of selfishness or immorality on His part. You can't find it. You need more proof? Consider the wonders of Jesus, His wonders. The miracles that He did, the acts of power. Even a secular historian named Josephus testified that in the days of Pontius Pilate, this Jesus of Nazareth stirred up the province of Galilee with miracles and acts of power. But even the greatest of these wonders pale in comparison with this last part of Jesus that I want you to think about, His work. It's the one singular act for which Jesus came to this earth, and we said it earlier, that Jesus was born to die. It's the reason He was marching into Jerusalem, to give His life for you and me. The sacrifice that we remember this Good Friday. And it's the reason we call it Good Friday. When Jesus would do this work so breathtaking in its sacrifice and so awe-inspiring in its generosity, that it would from that moment on change the world. It would even split time, BC and AD, and it would change the lives for thousands of years of those who came and bowed before Him and gave Him their lives. The God of some religions will ask you to kill for them. Christianity is the only religion I know of where our God dies for us.